Now we're going to move to today's perspective on the programme, and I hope that where you are in the world you can at least see the horizon ahead. That is the relative end of coronavirus. It seems for now at least to be the case for us here in Europe. Elsewhere, for example, in some African countries, so far the virus has not really hit us all, while others, of course, like India, are still fully in its grip. What comes next, though? Well, of course, it is the economic aftermath of coronavirus, and that is set to affect us for months and years to come. And with me today is Robin Bew. He's Managing Director of the Economist Intelligence Unit, which advises businesses, governments and academic institutions as well on how events like coronavirus will affect all of their different worlds and all of our worlds as well. Thanks very much for joining us on the programme. We keep hearing, of course, that the big hope for people, particularly us here in Europe and in the US, is for a big economic rebound as things open up again. Do you think we're likely to see that?
Well, you are going to see strong growth. Certainly the case as things unlock, and we're starting to see that in a number of countries around the world. If the economies are going to move upwards very quickly, and you're seeing some quite strong numbers in a number of markets, and I think you're going to see a lot more in Europe. That, though, is a little bit misleading. You have to remember last year was just terrible. So many businesses were closed down. So when you open them up, you will get a strong bounce. I think another way to think about this is at what point will we start to see the economy back where it was before this started? So let's say back where it was in January last year. For a lot of countries, that's not going to be until 2022, the middle and end. And for some emerging markets, actually quite a few emerging markets, it won't be until 2023. So I think out there, in our daily lives, we're going to experience in the second half of this year a sense that things are really starting to accelerate. But you're going to get to Christmas and you're going to look around and you're going to think, well, things are much better than they were, but they're still not back to before where we started in most of the countries around the world.
And lots of other countries that I mentioned, India just a few moments ago, obviously still in the real throes of it. I mean, presumably that's going to hinder a lot of that growth as well.
Yeah, for a lot of markets, one of the big important drivers is, are there any other countries around the world which are prepared to buy your exports? Last year, obviously, everywhere was shut down. So one additional factor over and above the fact that countries in national lockdown is that even those businesses that were working didn't have anywhere to export to. That's changed a bit this year. America's buying again, China's buying again. But I think when you look at countries like India, which is not a huge importer, but quite important for some markets, they're not really going to be buying. And there's a lot of other places around the world where they're going to act as a bit of a drag. The other thing about India, which I think is really important, is, of course, only 3 months ago, lots of commentators were saying India's dodged this particular bullet, that they were celebrating the fact they successfully navigated coronavirus. Now it looks absolutely terrible. I think it's important to look around the world and wonder whether there are any other places which are going to end up looking like that. And we look at Africa and we are very, very concerned, because in many ways, a lot of the things that we see in India today have the potential to happen in Africa in 6 months' time. Very, very low vaccination rates, great difficulty in achieving lockdowns because of the state of their economies. So we worry that India, even though it's absolutely awful, is not going to be the last place that we see that looks like this.
And all those things you just mentioned, of course, is going to make people, particularly investors, but just ordinary business as well, be very cautious still, isn't it?
I think that's right. Even if you look at just let's just say in Europe, for example, of course, in the UK, the vaccine programme is quite far advanced and there is a growing sense of optimism. And certainly we see growth rates being revised up. But even now, businesses are quite concerned that normality is still a very long way off. The government's still talking about restrictions running all the way through this year and into next year, albeit not as severe as the ones that we've had. You look on the continent, in continental Europe, obviously we have a number of countries which are back in lockdown, and a sense that that's going to be quite disruptive. So I think firms are really struggling to understand when they're going to have the confidence to be able to make long-term investment plans. In some countries, it's a bit easier. Obviously in America, the government has been extremely forceful in pumping cash into that economy. So I think that's giving businesses there a bit more confidence. And if you look to somewhere like China, there's a very strong sense that from an economic perspective, maybe not from a political and human rights perspective, they've managed to get ahead of this problem and businesses there are feeling very confident. But I think in most parts of the world, firms are very nervous. They've seen that recovery has been touted before and then the government's had to take it all away by imposing new lockdowns. They're very worried that's going to happen again.
How big an explosion, if you like, has coronavirus been to the world's economy? It was only just over 10 years ago, isn't it, that we suffered the financial crash. In relation to that and in relation to terms that ordinary people can actually measure and think about in their brains, how big a catastrophe, if that's the word, has coronavirus been?
Yeah, it's massively larger than the financial crisis in terms of the impact that it's had. So, firstly, it's been truly global, whereas the financial crisis obviously affected those markets which were most tightly tied to the financial system. This has happened in a completely global way. The extent to which governments have had to step in to try and support things is far, far greater. I know that lots and lots of people were very angst-ridden about the bailouts of the banks, but that's a drop in the bucket in comparison to what they've had to do this time around to hold economies together. And that's going to be with us for a long time because, of course, governments now are carrying huge amounts of debt. Their ability to respond this way, if we have any other crisis in the future, is much more in doubt now because government's already very indebted. There's a lot of worry about long-run impacts as well. Lots of businesses have changed forever on the back of this. So if you think about what's happening to the retail sector, this has massively accelerated e-shopping. It's massively accelerated e-health, which may turn out to be a very good thing, and e-education. Lots of businesses now having to completely rethink the way they work. I think as we come out of the other side of this, what we're going to find is we don't go back to the economy that we had before. Some businesses and some sectors that previously felt as if they could be quite successful, they're going to disappear, and other new ones like e-health are going to rise in their place. So I think one of the things that people all around the world are going to experience is when we come out of the other side, it's not going to feel the same. It is going to be different, and some sectors just aren't going to come back from this.
Robin, looking at your webpage and everything, and reading what you're all about and your company is all about, it's predicting, isn't it? A lot of it. It's trying to work out what's coming next. I mean, presumably, obviously, I suppose coronavirus was completely impossible to predict. But as things start to recover, can you kind of still keep predicting, knowing that there could be something like coronavirus that suddenly comes up to disrupt all your plans?
Yeah, I mean, our main service is, as you say, is a forecasting service. It's EIU Viewpoint, and people spend a lot of time thinking about what we're saying around the world in order to put together just short-term but also long-term investment plans. So a lot of our clients are thinking 5, 10, 20 years ahead if they're building power stations and things like that. Coronavirus, it's not something we specifically foresaw, but clearly this is not the first global health crisis. We've been in business since 1946, so we've been covering things like swine flu, things like SARS. So we had quite a bit of experience in talking to customers about the kind of effects that these things can have around the way that lockdowns work, around the disruption to trade and business. So quite right, we didn't predict this, although we are on the ground in China. So we did know very early back in December 2019 that there was something brewing there, and we could react pretty quickly to that, warning our clients what we thought might happen around the world. But I think the key things that we're able to help clients with is when these things happen, we're able to give them some insight about the capacity of governments to intervene to try and moderate the blow. That's one thing that our clients are very interested in. So when we see a crisis of any sort arising, how are governments going to be capable of doing anything about it? So you can provide a lot of advice on that. And then the pace of the bounce back. And I have to say that generally when we talk to our clients and when we talk to other commentators, people are usually a bit more optimistic than we are about how rapidly things will bounce back, because big crises like this, I think they're very, very difficult for organisations to sort of assimilate. They're beyond most people's experience. And so everyone assumes, well, this has got to be over in 3 months. It's got to be over in 6 months. Whereas we were saying right from the beginning that for the world as a whole, we're looking at 2023 before we're coming out of the other side of this. For our customers, that's a massive advantage in terms of thinking about where they're going to invest and the kind of commitments that they're prepared to make. It enable them to hunker down and save cash at a time when we were warning that this was going to go on for a very long time. But if you think back a year ago, lots of people were saying it would be over by the summer. Well, we never thought that was true, and I guess there's value in us being able to point to our clients, give them a bit more of a steer about how these kind of crises are going to play out.
Robin, great to talk to you on the programme today. Thanks very much. Robin Bew, Managing Director of the Economist Intelligence Unit, joining us there. Thanks a lot.